My name is Emily Carter, 31 years old, and the head nurse at a city hospital in Denver. And today, once again, I found myself arriving late to the annual Duncan family gathering. My old car turned onto the red brick driveway leading to my parents' suburban mansion. Luxury cars lined both sides like a showroom display. Mercedes, BMW, a brand new Range Rover, and, of course, right up front, was my sister Victoria's silver Audi. I turned off the engine, took a deep breath, and stepped out of the car. The scent of lavender from the front yard mixed with the crisp late autumn air, making my hand tremble slightly as I rang the bell. "Emily, you finally made it!" My mom appeared, lips bright red, wearing a pale lavender silk dress like she was headed for the stage. She hugged me quickly, but her eyes immediately flicked past my shoulder and landed on my old car. "You're still driving that?" I smiled, as if I hadn't heard the comment. "Traffic was heavy, Mom. There's a festival downtown." The moment I stepped inside, Victoria's voice cut through the room like a blade, sharp, clear. "Well, look who finally arrived. Mom was worried you got stuck in traffic. On your usual bus route?" The room erupted in polite, restrained laughter. I turned toward Victoria, slim, poised in an ivory blazer dress, a sparkling champagne flute in hand. She looked like she'd stepped out of a finance magazine. And me? I had just finished a 12-hour shift and still smelled faintly of disinfectant. "I drove here, actually," I replied calmly. "The hospital staff lot is free after 5 p.m. "Oh, still doing the nursing thing?" Victoria tilted her head, smirking. "Brian and I just invested in another vacation property in Vail. You really should think about your future, sis. Careers should evolve." Before I could reply, my dad appeared. "Victoria, tell everyone about the Aspen deal, that big contract." He gave her shoulder a proud pat. I stepped back, giving Victoria the stage, something she'd mastered since high school. During the party, I felt like a stranger in the audience of a very long, one-woman performance. Cousin Rachel caught my eye from the buffet table and gave me a sympathetic wink. I shrugged, took a sip of white wine from a passing tray, and reminded myself, stay calm. Don't let her drag you into the mud. Then, as if the spotlight was too tempting to resist, Victoria tapped her glass with a spoon, ringing out a clear chime. "Everyone, may I have a moment?" The room quieted. I knew exactly where this was going. "Brian and I are preparing to buy a new vacation home in Lake Tahoe," she beamed. 6 bedrooms, floor-to-ceiling windows, infinity pool. The dream is becoming reality. Some guests murmured in admiration. I just stared into my wine glass. "Of course, not everyone has that kind of access." She paused dramatically. "Emily, didn't you mention something about debt? That collection letter from the bank delivered to your apartment last month?" I froze. The room went silent. My wine glass suddenly felt heavy in my hand. "I never said that," I managed, my voice catching but steady. "I'm just being honest." "No shame in struggling," she said sweetly, but her words were barbed. "Not everyone can be successful. Everyone has their limits." I caught my mother's uneasy glance. My dad looked away. A few relatives busied themselves with dessert, avoiding the tension hanging in the room. I smiled, not out of ease, but because I knew it was time to change the rules of the game. "You're right," I said, setting down my glass. "Not everyone's meant to chase something big. Some of us choose something smarter." Victoria's brow furrowed, but my phone buzzed with a message, and I stepped out onto the balcony. A text from Greg, my real estate attorney, all set, papers signed. I looked through the window, where Victoria continued holding court under warm golden lights. She had no idea I'd been watching every one of her posts about that dream home for months. No idea I'd been saving every dime, investing carefully, while she flaunted borrowed luxury. And now, I owned that house. I quickly typed a reply to Greg. "Perfect, keep it quiet. I'll know when it's time to make it public." I stayed out on the balcony a little longer, the breeze lifting my hair. The calm before the storm. But this time, the storm would carry my name, Emily Carter. 3 months before the family gathering, I had started watching Victoria's Instagram account more closely than usual, not because I cared about her posing with cocktails or showing off new heels, but because one day she posted a clip from the second floor of a lakeside house with the caption, "I've found it. My dream for 40." I took a screenshot. For 7 years, ever since graduating from my advanced nursing program, I'd volunteered for night shifts. No one fought for those grueling hours, so I'd collected solid shift differentials. Almost all my extra income? Not spent. Invested in index funds, later in bonds, and eventually in small-scale real estate. I still remember that Christmas Eve when I was 26. While the whole family raised glasses to toast Victoria's promotion to regional manager at a luxury real estate firm, I stepped out to take a call and rushed to the hospital for a multi-car pileup. When I returned, blood still on my scrubs, Victoria gave me that familiar look, part pity, part disdain. "No one's forcing you to live like this, Emily. Some people are born to serve others." I smiled at her then, but I never forgot. Just like I never forgot the birthdays they skipped, or how Victoria made me feel like a faulty draft of something she had perfected. So when I found out she was targeting the lakeside property in Crystal Pines, an up-and-coming area north of the state, I acted quietly. I didn't contact her agent. I went straight to Darren Buckley, a local independent realtor, completely disconnected from Victoria, but the one who had listed the house internally. "Ms. Carter," Darren said during our first meeting at a small lakeside cafe, "there's interest in this place already. A couple from Denver. Very serious. But no deposit yet." I nodded. "I'll pay in full. Cash. If you can keep my identity confidential." He raised an eyebrow. "Cash. You're sure?" I opened my investment app and scrolled through my portfolio. Numbers no one in my family ever asked about. Because they believed Victoria when she said, "Emily's struggling, probably still paying off her car." "I'm sure," I said, handing him a financial statement from my attorney. Everything moved faster than I expected. Within 2 weeks, contracts were signed, funds transferred, and I became the legal owner of Lakeside Estate 88, Emerald Lake. 6 bedrooms, open-concept kitchen facing the water, private dock, and a mahogany reading room fireplace. Yes, the very room Victoria once filmed herself in, declaring she'd write her midlife memoirs here. I didn't tell anyone. No posts, no calls to mom. I just let everything unfold quietly. Just like the way Victoria always overshadowed me with flashy words and polished glamour. I returned to night shifts, emergency surgeries, and stacks of paperwork. During lunch breaks in the hospital break room, I began planning the renovations for the new house. Renovations for myself, not for show, but also to prepare for a very specific moment. In the moment, Victoria believed she was about to announce the greatest achievement of her life. 1 week before the intimate dinner Victoria planned, I got a text from Aiden, my closest friend and colleague at the hospital. "I just saw Victoria's reel. She's standing in front of the Lakeside Estate, your house. Says there's going to be a huge announcement next week. What's your plan?" I took a sip of coffee and replied, "I'm planning to let her dig her own hole first." 2 days later, I received an email from my real estate attorney. "The deed has been mailed to the registered address. All paperwork is finalized." I printed a copy, slipped it into a white envelope, and tucked it securely into the hidden compartment of my purse. Not for today, but to make sure when the moment came, I wouldn't need to scramble. I wouldn't need anyone else to speak for me again. That same day, I stumbled across Victoria's live stream. She was touring the house interior, my house, with sparkling eyes and a confident voice. "This is where my family will spend the holidays. I've waited for this moment since I was 23. Beautiful dreams, sometimes they're not bought with money, but with relentless effort." I laughed out loud. That line was rich. For years, she called me the sweet sister with no ambition, said I was content living a small, limited life, that I had a respectable job but shouldn't dream too big. The funny thing is, She unknowingly taught me everything. Every time Victoria rambled about investment cycles, rental yields, or spotting the next hot neighborhood, I listened quietly and then applied it more precisely than she ever did. I learned not to show off, not to let my worth be judged by handbags or follower counts. I learned how to let people assume I was weak. Well, really, I was just waiting for the right moment to rise. I didn't need to chase the spotlight. It was already waiting. And now, that estate, not my dream, but a symbol, was mine, before Victoria even had a chance to sign a single page. Because sometimes victory doesn't come from shouting, it comes from perfect silence and one precise strike at pride. Saturday evening. I parked a little ways down from Victoria's house, beneath a maple tree nearly stripped of leaves. The golden lights spilling from her mansion sparkled like a Broadway stage. And yes, I was walking into a performance where the lead actress thought she was the star. But tonight, the script would not go the way she imagined. I stepped in just as laughter filled the living room. The Duncans, dressed like they were attending a billionaire's gala, glitzy, confident, and just a bit artificial. "Emily, you made it!" Brian, Victoria's husband, greeted me warmly with a social hug. "Thanks for the invite," I replied, glancing around the room. Mom chatting with Aunt Carol, Dad near the bar, visibly anticipating something. Victoria entered, radiant in a deep Bordeaux silk gown, bold lipstick, hair curled to perfection. Wineglass in hand, she beamed as if she hadn't humiliated me in front of the entire family just weeks ago. "Oh, Emily, wearing the same dress from last year's party?" She tilted her head, voice sugar-coated with poison. I smiled lightly. "Didn't want to steal your spotlight." Victoria laughed, thinking I was joking. I wasn't. Dinner was served. Thinly sliced Wagyu beef, lemon tarts, and expensive wine. Under the crystal chandelier, everything gleamed with carefully curated charm. Then, the moment she'd been building toward arrived. Victoria stood, gently tapped her glass to capture the room's attention. "Dear family," she began, eyes shining like she was about to receive a crown. "I have some wonderful news to share tonight." Conversation stopped. I saw Mom lean in slightly. Dad adjusted his tie. After months of searching, Brian and I finally found the perfect place to call our second home. A stunning lakeside estate at Emerald Lake, complete with a private dock, west-facing reading room, and a classic fireplace. She paused, just as she always did. "We'll be finalizing the deal next week." Applause followed, scattered at first, then building. Mom's eyes shimmered. A few raised their glasses. I sat still, my hand resting gently on the purse beneath the table. Then, like a scene interrupted by the wrong soundtrack, Brian stood up. "Not now, honey," she whispered. "No, you need to hear this now," his voice lowered, but firm. "I just got an email from the agent. The house was sold 3 weeks ago." The dining room fell silent. "What?" Victoria blinked. "That's impossible. They promised to hold it for us." "A promise doesn't mean they'll turn down another buyer's deposit," Brian replied, holding out his phone. "And the buyer asked to remain anonymous." She turned sharply to me. "Emily, do you know anything?" I took a sip of wine, slowly set my glass down. "Maybe, more than you think." Victoria frowned. "Don't tell me you—" I reached down, pulled an envelope from my purse and slid it across the table. No words, just movement. She snatched it, tore it open, and scanned the papers like she was hypnotized. The chandelier light glinted off the deed, where the name Emily Ann Carter was printed clearly next to legal owner. No one spoke. The room was suffocatingly silent. "This can't be," she whispered, lips trembling. "This is my house. I picked it. I made the deposit." "You picked it," I said softly, voice as calm as the lake breeze. "But I bought it." Mom gasped, hand over her mouth. Dad sat stunned. Brian, for the first time, looked at me with something close to respect. Victoria collapsed into her chair. She clutched the papers, eyes dazed. "How did you do this?" she asked, almost breathless. 7 years, I said, standing tall. 7 years of night shifts. No designer bags, no vacations. While you burned through cash on purses and cocktail parties. I was investing. You boasted about the market. I listened. Every time you called me just a basic nurse, I bought another stock. Victoria didn't reply. She couldn't. No words were sharp enough to cut through the truth now laid bare. I stood up. Success isn't about shouting for the whole world to hear. It's about knowing when to stay silent and acting at the right moment. Then I turned to my parents. I never asked for praise, but tonight, if anyone wants to know who I really am, this is your answer. My father opened his mouth as if to say something, then stayed silent. My mother looked at me like she was seeing a different daughter, a daughter she never truly understood. I tucked the envelope back into my purse and walked away from the dinner table, leaving behind a familiar world built on false appearances. That night, when I returned to my small apartment, the one everyone assumed I lived in because I was broke, I turned on the light, poured a warm cup of tea, and opened my laptop. I didn't feel proud, I just felt right. Because sometimes it takes a very public reckoning for a family to re-examine everything they once dismissed. I thought after that dramatic night, Victoria would disappear off my radar for a while, at least to patch up the pride she'd shredded at the dinner table. But I was wrong. 3 days later, while I was sitting in the hospital break room, still holding the ICU chart, my phone buzzed. The sender? Brian. Need to talk. There's something you should know. Cafe next to the hospital, 6 p.m.? I hesitated for a few seconds. Part curiosity, part instinct telling me this was going to be big. Brian was already there when I arrived. Shirt wrinkled, coffee untouched. He looked like someone who hadn't slept in days. "I'm guessing this isn't about the roasted chicken from the party," I said, sitting down. Brian sighed and pulled a stack of documents from his jacket pocket. "You need to see this." I opened them. Credit card statements, personal loan applications, detailed spreadsheets from 3 different banks, all in Victoria Duncan's name. The total debt exceeded $85,000. Used investment claims to open fake lines of credit? I asked, barely believing it. Not just that. Brian nodded, his eyes heavy. She also forged my signature on 2 secondary loan applications. I only found out when the bank called to verify. She was planning to use the lake house as collateral for a restructuring loan. I leaned back, chilled. All this time, Victoria had held her head high, lecturing others like she was the textbook definition of flawless success. But it was all just a castle built on debt? She thought she'd buy that house, Brian said hoarsely, use it as leverage to save herself financially, but when you got it, everything crumbled. I looked at him. So, what now? Brian shook his head. She wants you to sell the house back, or at least allow it to be used as collateral. She's pulling your parents in, trying to convince them to mortgage their home. I gripped my coffee cup tightly. Absolutely not. He nodded. I agree, but you need to be ready. Victoria doesn't give up easily. And she didn't. That evening, I got home and found my mom waiting at the door of my apartment. "Emily, we need to talk," she began nervously, clutching a familiar Chanel bag, likely borrowed from Victoria. We sat in the kitchen, I brewed some tea. She looked around like it was her first time truly seeing the world I lived in. Small, neat, modest, but warm. "I know you're upset," she said, "but Victoria, she's in crisis. She has no way out. If you sell the house, even just part of it, it could help her pay the debt and recover." I set the teacup down. "Her debt is not my responsibility." "But she's your sister." "Does that mean anything?" I cut in. "Does being sisters give her the right to forge documents, lie to her husband, drag our parents into financial risk just to protect her image?" My mother fell silent. I'd never spoken to her so firmly. But I'd also never been forced to carry the consequences of someone else's recklessness like this before. I've worked nearly nonstop for 7 years to afford that house, and not one person in this family ever asked me how. She spent like there was no tomorrow and now wants help? My mother's eyes welled up, but I didn't stop. Selling that house isn't just losing a property, it's erasing the boundary, and once I let her cross it, there won't be a last time. She looked down. Victoria says she's going to change. I'll believe it when she does it, not when she says it. A week later, my family organized an emergency meeting at my parents' house. Jeremy, my cousin, texted me. Victoria's prepping for a big scene, you coming? I hadn't planned to, but then I changed my mind. When I walked into the living room, Victoria was seated in the center. No designer dress, no heavy makeup, just a 36-year-old woman who looked worn down. Emily, she said as she saw me, I was wrong. I know that. Sat down without replying. I stepped on your pride for years. I thought success had to sparkle, but I traded too much, and now I have nothing left. I met her eyes. And what am I in your story? A tool to save you? Victoria bowed her head. No. You're a reminder that some people take the long road, the quiet path, and still get there first. You don't need to help me. But I wanted to say, I regret it. I took a deep breath. You know, the worst part isn't that you're in debt, it's that you wouldn't take responsibility. But now that you've said it, that's the first step. I stood up. And the house? It's not for sale, not for collateral, and definitely not to fix someone else's mess. I walked out, leaving behind a silent Victoria and a family beginning to understand. Some lessons are paid for in loss, but some people, like me, learn how to stand tall so they won't be dragged down. 2 weeks after that tense gathering, I sent an email inviting the entire family to a housewarming party at the Emerald Lake Estate. The home that was once Victoria's broken dream, now a symbol of my own choice. I didn't write much in the invitation. Just one line. Family is where we begin again, if we're brave enough to redraw the line. That afternoon, the sun was soft. The breeze from the lake carried the scent of pine and something else. Peace, laced with anticipation. Jeremy arrived early to help me set out light snacks and wine, while Aiden, my best friend, brought a homemade cheesecake, placing it proudly in the center of the long wooden table in the lake-facing dining room. At exactly 6 p.m., cars began pulling into the driveway. My parents were the first to walk in, followed by Aunt Carol, Uncle Daniel, and finally, Victoria. She wore a simple beige sweater, no makeup, no designer bag. Her eyes were still tired, but different, deeper, more real. This house is beautiful, my mother whispered, eyes misty. You've made it a home. I smiled, and I hope it won't just be mine. Everyone gathered around the table as I stood, holding a large envelope in hand. Thank you all for coming. Tonight isn't just a celebration, it's a decision. For the future, for our family. I opened the envelope and pulled out a stack of documents, neatly arranged and clearly notarized. I've established a family trust. This home will be the trust's primary asset. A low murmur stirred. I raised a hand, signaling everyone to wait. This trust isn't about building wealth. It's about creating value. I don't want this house to become a point of division. I want it to bring us together, but with boundaries. My eyes locked on Victoria, then moved across the room. First, no one may mortgage or sell the house without 100% agreement from all named members of the trust. Second, the right to use the house will rotate, but only for those with stable finances, no significant debt, and no legal issues. The trust will fully cover financial counseling services for any family member who needs support. And fourth, a portion of the trust's investment returns will fund a scholarship named after our grandparents for relatives pursuing nursing or community health careers. The room fell completely silent. Jeremy was the first to break it. You did all this for the family? He asked, eyes wide. Not for the past, I replied, but because I still believe we can become better people. Victoria looked down at the documents in front of her. Her hands trembled slightly. You did this after everything I put you through. I nodded. You broke the trust. But everyone deserves a chance to rebuild, if they're truly willing. She looked up, eyes red. And if I want to start from step one? I pulled out another form from the envelope. A personal financial advisor will start next week. This is a 6-month counseling schedule, paid for by the trust. If you complete it, next summer, you can book time at this house. Victoria took it. For the first time in years, I saw her nod without deflecting. I've lived in the illusion of success for too long, she said quietly. Now, I want to live truthfully. My mom cried. My dad stood, walked over, and took my hand. I'm proud of you, Emily. We owe you an apology for never truly listening. No one owes me anything, I said, feeling weightless. We just need to start again, with respect and clear values. I turned to Jeremy. You're the keeper and auditor of the trust. Every quarter, I'll review the financial reports, property use, and scholarship needs with you. He chuckled. Never thought I'd take Excel this seriously. The whole room laughed. Not forced, not awkward, just genuine. As the night wore on, most people headed out. Only Aiden, Victoria, and I remained. She stepped out onto the balcony, where the lake breeze cooled the air. I still have a lot of work to do to make things right, she said, not turning around. But tonight, you showed me something I never believed. That success isn't about beating others. It's about getting through the worst together. I nodded, fingers wrapped around my warm cup of tea. As long as you stick to the plan, I will, she said, turning around. For the first time, no trace of the old Victoria. Just a woman learning how to start over. One April morning, while I was brewing coffee in the lake-facing kitchen of the Emerald Estate, my phone rang. Unknown number. A young woman's voice came through the line. Hello, this is Sandra Kim, a representative from Northview Development. We've been following your family trust and would like to propose a meeting. I heard every word clearly. I wasn't surprised. Rumors about development around Emerald Lake had been circulating all spring. Several small property owners had already sold to real estate firms, planning resorts and luxury villas. But my house? The one I purchased with sweat, sacrifice, and quiet resolve? Was not for sale. The meeting was scheduled for Friday afternoon, at a glass-walled office overlooking the construction site. Sandra, poised, sharp, laid a detailed plan in front of me. We're not offering to buy, she said. We'd like you to become a partner. I flipped through each page. A blueprint for an integrated resort, lakeside trails, and a wellness center, with the Emerald Estate as its focal point. A symbolic heart of the entire project. Partnership, meaning I retain ownership? I asked, eyes fixed on the equity breakdown. Exactly, Sandra nodded. We'll manage the surrounding development. You, through the trust, keep full ownership of the original property and benefit from increased value. I smiled slightly. They understood the game. And this time, so did I. A few weeks later, an article on the Carter Family Trust appeared in Denver Health and Impact, featured in the June spotlight. The cover showed me with my surgical team in the operating room, beneath a bold headline. From Emergency Room to Financial Architect, Emily Carter's Story of Family Legacy. I've never cared much about fame, but that article made my father text me first, for the very first time. I read it. I'm sorry I underestimated everything you've quietly built. As for my mother, always cautious, she surprised me with a video call, proudly showing the magazine framed on their living room shelf. Your dad had it mounted, she said, smiling. That meant more to me than any praise I'd ever received at a fancy party. On the first day of summer, I hosted the Trust's first quarterly meeting at the Emerald Estate. From the living room, the gentle sound of lake water rippled through the open windows, bringing a sense of true beginning. Victoria arrived early, holding her laptop, a budget spreadsheet, and a printed personal savings plan. Your advisor is really good, she said, sitting down next to me. I was actually thinking about asking if you could refer one for a friend. I nodded, then glanced at the spending chart she'd prepared. No luxury handbags, no weekend shopping sprees. For the first time, I saw change not in words, but in action. After the budget review, Jeremy, the trust's record keeper, moved on to an important agenda item: the first round of scholarship applications. There are 3 submissions, 2 from cousins pursuing nursing, and 1 from a younger relative who wants to study healthcare administration, he announced. I smiled. We're off to the right start. When the meeting ended, everyone drifted onto the deck. The sun was slowly setting behind the pines, casting a warm golden glow over the dock where my father was pouring tea. For the first time, I saw him and Victoria sitting side by side, not arguing, not assigning blame, but simply looking forward, together. My mother came over, holding a small piece of paper. Do you remember the poem your grandfather once wrote? I nodded. About the roof. And the sail? She smiled. Today, I see. You're both. I said nothing. I just held her hand, then looked around the house, a place that once symbolized rivalry, now transformed into something else. Healing. Later that afternoon, Victoria walked over to me. I wanted to say this, she began slowly. If one day I truly regain stability, I want to contribute to the trust. Not to make up for anything, but because I finally understand what it feels like to give instead of just take. I looked at her in the golden sunset and nodded gently. And if you need more time, I'll make a formal request to the board, she smiled. You taught me that. I laughed, then poured us both another glass of wine. As night fell, the whole family gathered again on the wooden deck, glasses clinking, laughter echoing with the rhythm of the waves. No judgmental glances, no performance masks, just real people, owning their flaws, fixing what was broken, and learning how to love one another the right way. In that moment, I realized, sometimes the sweetest form of revenge isn't winning, it's giving others the chance to win with you. Because there are things, like a lakeside home, like rebuilt trust, that can't be measured by money, but by the courage to begin again at the right time. Emily's story isn't just about reclaiming justice. It's a testament to the quiet strength of persistence and choosing the right moment. In real life, some people are underestimated simply because they don't put on a show, but that doesn't mean they're weak. True success isn't about glitz and glam. It's built on quiet resilience and unshakable self-worth. Sometimes, the best revenge is living a life that forces others to reflect on their own. What do you think about Emily's choices and how she faced her family? Share your thoughts below, and don't forget to follow the channel so you don't miss more heartfelt and inspiring stories about family and life.